people to the Zoom
Yep.
call as we are going on. So
Yep.
thank you everyone for joining. As most of you know, this is Atlassian community event which we used to have in person, usually in Atlassian or any other office that would give us space. We had these events, and the events are definitely to support Atlassian community, product users, anyone who is passionate about the products, want to learn more, or share their experiences about it. So we are very excited to have Prashant and Kush today presenting, especially because Prashant joined the leadership, like the community leadership team. I don't think we met in person, Prashant, so it was during the so it was during the first probably lockdown or whenever, but yeah, we are looking forward to hear from him today. And we welcome any questions. As Prashant mentioned, this is one of the topics that we didn't have for a while, a little bit more technical and not talking about Bitbucket. So hope you enjoy it. Feel free to ask questions as we go. And we will also record and make this available after, if anyone wants to share or have a look again. And if you have any suggestions or anything that you would like to ask, feel free to send me a message directly, or you can always go on Atlassian community page and send us all the message, or any suggestions that you have. So I will hand over to Prashant. Thank you.
Thank you, Jovanka. So hello everyone. As Jovanka mentioned, I'm one of the Atlassian community leader here in Sydney, along with Mark, Jimmy, and Jovanka, and Cindy, who hasn't joined today, but this is one of the community leader here in Sydney as well. So today's presentation, mainly we will be focusing on Git best practices and Bitbucket pipeline. That's the agenda of today's meeting. I personally, so I have been developer since the beginning 2004, and I led a lot of the teams in Australia and across the like our current company XEnabler as well. So last one that I did in Australia was Telstra iOS mobile team. So before we started XEnabler, and now we have internal team of 35 people. So again, various kind of projects, mobile, web, etc., and long history in Git and all the source control systems. So I just want to gauge a little bit about the audience. If you can just put in chat quickly, like if any of you have experience with the Git, and if yes, how long the experience is, so that I know I'm not talking baby things when there are experts in the room, etc. So just quickly, if I can get everyone to put how long they have been using Git or Bitbucket or any VCS for that matter. Okay, thank you. 2 years, 6 months, good. Okay, so yeah, so we do have, I guess, young and some very senior audience in the group as well. So I'll cover a lot of the things about that is some of those things might seem basic, but I hope that is useful to other people as well. So just a quick history of version control systems. Prior to 1970s, where people used to just code on their own computer, Control C, Control V was a king in multiple folders. Then the version control systems came in place, and as you can imagine, they were just local because internet wasn't a big thing, or network even wasn't that big thing. Then came the generation of centralized version control system. And now we are in a distributed version control system. So the difference between central and distributed version control system. In central, it's kind of a server client mode where there's one source of like server or a central repository, which is a source of truth. You check out the copy, work on it, commit it, and then check back in, update that. That was subversion, mainly was like NTF. I think Team Foundation Server, TFS, was another popular one by Microsoft. Then when Linux was created and it was too hard to manage, it was creating bottleneck, Linus Torvald and the group started creating Git and Mercurial, where it was like a distributed system where you have a repository that is on the server, also in the remote, and also in the local. Now, what this picture doesn't signify is you can have multiple remotes as well. So the check-in and check-out happens in local, and then sync can happen between one or two or multiple repositories, depending on how your system is placed. Typically, you have one server repository and then a local repository. The classic operations on the Git that you do is init the repository, then clone it from the server, config it to anything like git ignore or anything that you want to put, any submodules or anything, add the source to it, commit it, check the status, log, etc. Once you basically have the source ready, you go into like, you can reset it or clean it, and branch out, like the branching and everything. So we'll go into detail of how to do the proper branching and how you can keep things in sync and how to manage the source in multiple. And now, assuming that all of us have some experience with Git, I'm just going to skip through that and gonna go straight into like different Git workflows, that how we typically manage different type of repositories, a branching structure in Git. Before I jump into that, do we have any questions that we want to address before this? Feel free to put in chat or unmute yourself and ask at any point. So I want this session to be very interactive, so don't feel like you will be disturbing in between. So if you have any questions at any point in time, just unmute yourself, ask it, fire away. So there are different practices that are followed in Git workflows. Primarily, there are 5 or 6 different patterns that I have seen in various ways, but there are 2 that are majorly used. One is called Git flow, which is on Bitbucket. It is the one of the flow that is documented, and then what happens in that is master basically remains as like a document, but develop is your live and the working branch mainly. So you start with your master branch and then create a develop branch from that. Now, any feature or bug fixes or anything happens on the develop branch. Any hot fixes, so anything that is that needs to go in production straight away, branched out from the master, tested on it, and it is merged in both develop and the master. Now, the idea is basically develop is always the recent copy here. So any feature that are done goes back to develop. When you have a long-standing feature that might be going. Now, when you want to do a release, because develop is the latest copy, you branch out, you create a release branch from develop, and then do any bug fixes that are related to that release branch, put on that. And once the release is finalized, you merge that back in master as well as develop, and that will basically become the latest master. So the deployment will happen from master, but as you can see, develop is always the latest and like the live branch in this particular workflow. Now, the other flow that is mentioned on GitHub is a GitHub flow. Now, what this advocates is that master is the true and the latest copy of the code. So rather than having a separate develop branch, it says everything can happen on master primarily. So You start with master, put any features or bug fixes, they will go in master. When you want to take something to the production, you will create a pre-production branch, do any bug fixes or testing on that, and then basically put it live in the production. Also, sometimes you have multiple release going on, so you will create a release branch from master. You will do any release specific changes on that master. Now this is assumed that it's a stable change, and then it goes to staging or pre-production and then production. But as you can see, all the work is done on master, and then only when the things are ready to release, it's actually branched out. So there are no multiple branches here. Now they both have their pros and cons. The reason people like usually prefer one or the other, it can depend on the team size, the complexity of the project, the release life cycle. So you will see that this particular one, it has like, the develop is the live branch versus the master is the live branch. So everybody is working from master most of the time. Usually what I have seen is GitHub flow is better when you have a very small team and everybody is just working on like, one release at a time or one true copy of the source, and the work is closely attached. So don't bother creating multiple branches that is required, and then everybody can work on the one branch and only branch out when you want to go in production. Now, while this both flows have the theories and how to do properly, in the real life, what I have seen is you see the mixture of both of this flow. So what happens is something like this. So this is how I typically do my projects. And again, I'm happy for the feedback or question, anything here. So when the product is just starting, we look more like a GitHub flow, where master is the true copy. We create the feature branches from master, merge it back into master once the pull request is approved. We put bug fixes on master. Now, once we are ready for the release, we basically branch out develop branch as well as the release branch. So when there is a start of the release, you don't want to taint master with any new features at that point. So at that point, you sort of switch from GitHub flow to Git flow kind of model, where you branch out develop, and the develop becomes the latest and the live copy of the development team. The release is basically then on the release branch, you only put the bug fixes. So the features are locked down at this point for this release, and any bug fixes are done on that. Once the release is ready, you merge that back in master, release from the master, and that is merged back in develop as well. Any hot fixes, again, regardless of any flow, usually hot fixes are always branched out from master and put on the master, but they are then subsequently merged back into develop or any release branch that is going out to make sure the code has that fix available as well. As you can see, the develop keeps going here. Now, also, if you go into like, for example, in Telstra, we had, I think now we have 15 different teams, which works on a single code base. Each team consume of the two pizza theory that we all, like most of the organizations are going towards two pizza team, the feature teams. So in that case, you have 15, like, 6, 7 teams working in parallel. Also with continuous deployment, what happens is every month you have a release. So typically what happens is rather than one, you have 4 different release branches going. So, or 3 at least, because there's a 3-month cycle for a release, but then every month one release is going out. Now, in those cases, the importance and the importance of like keeping everything up to date and in sync can be a major pain point, because you have a feature that is going out this April, and then in May that feature might look little differently. So your code for May release has to be always on top of the April release. Now you can achieve that by automation and the like expansion. So how do you do that? So there are things like, sorry, I'm gonna go a little bit forward and then go back. So what you can do is you can use things like Git hooks. Now, what Git hooks does is, like any system, it monitors for the event in the repository and then it responds to that. Now, typically, what you will do is in this particular system, once you have a develop and a release branch going on, you will create an auto merge based on a Git hook from the release branch to the develop branch. If you want to always keep the develop branch, you don't want to wait for it to get merged in the master. So what you can do is, like, whenever release branch has some commit, it will automatically get merged into develop branch. Or if you have a couple of release going on, you can then say, all right, if release has this a new commit, then it should get auto merged into develop in the future release branch. That way, you only have to, like, all the automatic merges will happen overnight. And then in the morning, if there are any merge conflicts, the developer who is working on that particular feature can go fix it and then make sure that the branch is always up to date. This is very important. If you, like I said, in Telstra, when we were last doing, there was always 3 release branches and a develop branch always going on. So it is very important that those branches are always up to date. Otherwise, it can create a lot of merge conflicts. As I had a saying in the starting, a plural of developers is a merge conflict, and you try to avoid that. Now, when it comes to, like, merging from the feature branch or from the bug fix branch, there are 2 different things that people do. So you might be working on a feature branch, and then because the develop is getting, work by other people, they are, like, your develop is having new commits or your master is having new commit. Let's call master as your primary branch, public branch, and then you have your private branch, feature branch, which only you are working on. So there are 2 ways you can actually keep up to date with the changes that are happening on public branch to keep your private branch up to date, so you don't end up with merge conflicts when you actually create a pull request. So one is rebase and the other is merge. Now, can I just get a note, like, if everybody knows about merge and rebase? Because this is always a, classic debate I had with so many developers, where they know about both, but they all have one or the other as a preference. So I just want to touch base, like, what is the difference between merge and rebase, if anybody is not clear. So when you do a merge, so you branched out from, let's say, point A in master, and you did some changes. Now, master already had, somebody else got a pull request merge, and master had, like, a couple of more changes. So when you use merge as a way, you basically merge master into your branch, in your private branch before, and then create a pull request to merge back your branch into the master. So before you actually try to merge back into master, always merge your public branch. Like, ideally, this should happen every morning. Like, every morning you start your day, take the public branch and merge into your own branch, and then basically when you are ready, you can create the pull request. Now, this is one way of doing that. As you can see at this point, when you do the merge, it has changes from both the branches. Now, rebase achieves the same state, but in a different way. So when you rebase your private branch, so in this case, it's a same scenario. Your private branch had 2 more commits after you branched out originally, and now you want to, like, be on top of this particular release. So when you rebase, what actually happens is basically it will rewrite the history as if you branched out from here. Now, the way it happens is basically it will ask you to, like, basically join the code at each commit. So you can do either iteratively, or you can just take, like, the total changes combine of this and then rebase your branch onto that. So what will happen is your initial point of this branch will have all the changes here. Now, if you see here, your original branch is actually not changed. Only the last commit, the merge commit, actually changes the branch. In here, these changes will be applied to each commit that you have. and that means at the start your first commit will get rewritten, your second commit, and so on. All the commits on your private branch will get rewritten, and the end flow is same, that you will again create pull requests to merge back into the public branch. Now the reason I have put here is to enforce the point that when you use rebase as a feature as your preferred method, you should always ask that is anyone else is using this branch. If the answer that will sorry, my mic had some trouble. Can anyone still hear me? Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
so good.
Yes.
Now
So
we can, yeah.
The reason I want to make sure is basically if you have your private branch, that is it is fine to do either, but the public branches should never have a rebase. So if this branch is shared by multiple people, then you should never do rebase, because it will rewrite history of other people who have coded different things from that point onwards as well. So uh, and again, by configuration in Bitbucket or in GitHub, doesn't matter which one you use, you can put the configuration in to don't allow rebase on the public branch or not allow merge without any pull request. So you can do all that via configuration as well. So the other aspect of Git is submodule versus subtree. So has anyone has everyone used submodule or subtree, or like any any questions at this point before we jump into subtree versus submodule? Okay. Yep. All right. So the submodule, now you have a primary repository, and for the purpose of reuse, or sometime what happens is there is another repository or the project that you want to use in your project. So there is a way of, like, of course you can download the jar or download the source and put it in your repository, and then not worry about any subsequent changes in that new repository that you added as a part of your project. But what usually happens is, if you have a modular application, so you might have network library as a different project, and you want to keep working on both the projects, and you want to keep those two attached. So there are two ways of doing in Git: submodule versus subtree. Now, when you do a submodule, what it does is basically, now these two might sit in you have a project top folder, and within that you might have another folder for dependency or library or something, and you have another project there. So the folder structure remains same, but when you do as a submodule, it basically works as a dependency. So when I say dependency, it will basically treat them as a separate Git repository, even though it is inside the same folder. So if you make changes in, let's say, your repository 1, those changes will get committed to repository 1, Git repository 1, and it will be synced with repository 1. When you do some commit in repository 2, it will have, if you are using some visual tool like source tree, you will have two separate commit history, bold and everything, and you will see them as separate repositories, and you can manage the changes individually, commit them into individual repos. The way repo 1 will always get update is when it points, there is a way of pointing from one commit to another commit of submodule via git submodule update or git. So you will basically treat them as two separate repository, and their commit and everything will remain independent. So the branching, everything will remain independent. Now, this is useful if repository 2 is owned by another team, or or is a public library that you downloaded and you just want to keep reference of that or something like that. It's probably a better model. But sometimes what happens is you want to keep your modular code, but you don't want to, because the typical mistake that people do when they use submodule is that they forget to update submodule, or someone updated submodule but you didn't, and you were working on an older commit of submodule, and now your code works fine on your local. As soon as you push it to the public repository, everybody's code breaks because you just updated submodule to a wrong commit. And that is a typical mistake you see in submodule because it's easy to miss. So what another practice that came into picture is called subtree. So subtree works similar way where you have two remote repository 1 and repository 2, but inside your local machine, those two repository will be combined. So when I say combined, what it means is you will see a common commit graph and the common changes at one place. So in your one source tree Git repository view, you can see changes made in both of those repository. And individually, they will stay in sync with the remote repository like repo 1 and repo 2, but those commits and everything will get downloaded, and you can see the commits coming to your one repository, local repository. So it combines those two so that you don't miss, and your code is easier to see in one set of source code or the source code view. The folder structure still remains the same. The dependency via jar or whatever you are maintaining still remains the same. It's just the Git repository structure and the commit graph becomes common one commit graph. Now this is very useful if it's just you just created a separate repository for the maintainability or the extensibility that later on will be used in different projects. But right now, everybody is working on both the projects and they are making changes. It's easy to keep track of that in that scenario. So any question here on submodule and subtree? So which method would be best for something like WordPress and some of its larger plugins like WooCommerce? So because WooCommerce is a third-party library and you normally don't make changes in WooCommerce that much, you just consume the changes, I would probably go with submodule because in that case, the lead will be the only one. When you want to change to latest version of WooCommerce or something, there will be only one person doing it. It wouldn't be the entire team doing that. And the code is not that dynamic as well because you will be doing it periodically. You wouldn't be doing it day-to-day basis and the entire team. So for those kind of public library, I would still use submodule. I hope that answers your question. Yep, thank you. Any other questions here for that? Or even feedback or if I have said something wrong, so feel free.
Yes, okay. Feel free to unmute, ask questions, comment.
Yep. Okay, so like I said, the forking Git hook, we already covered Git hooks. Git forking is basically when you have a public repository and you're gonna build upon that, but you wanna keep taking from the original repository later when they have update or something. You usually fork the project on your own repository and then you work on your own repository. And when you are ready to take the new update from that original repository, you can take that. So typical example is 8x8 is a company who does video conferencing like Zoom and everything. And it's very probably one of the best and popular public library of all the video conferencing. So what people do is basically they fork that solution from GitHub, they build their solution on top of that. And whenever they release fix or anything like that, they take it from the original repository. And then sometime if they have built something that they want to contribute back, they create a pull request that can go back to the public repository via separate pull request process. So Git fork is very useful and popular on a public open source projects that is widely used. Now, multiple remote is kind of similar to forking, but the reason multiple remotes are used. So, for example, companies like us who are service companies, sometimes what happens is client has given us one developer account to their repositories, and we have like a lot of developers working on that project, and we will be doing a lot of stuff, but releasing to the client at steady space once that is tested and is stable. So in that case, what we do is we maintain multiple remote, and then the person who is basically pushing to the client is the team lead, and who will do all the sanitary checks on the code, and all the public branch will be synced with the client remote, but all the private branches will remain on our remote only. So that's very useful if you are dealing with, sometimes you have, oh, my client only gave me one developer access, or you want to keep working on the stuff on multiple private branches but only sync the public branches or something. Multiple remote can be useful as well. So the various things you can do to maintain like source code in a clean way, also the practices and everything. So that's what I had for Git in general. I'll hand it over to Kush for Bitbucket pipeline now. Any questions that anyone has on Git? Okay, Kush, you can start screen sharing. Yep, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Prashant. All right. Let me see. All right. I hope you can see my screen.
Yep.
Can you hear me properly? Okay. So, so the next topic we'll cover is Bitbucket pipelines. So we'll talk about what are these pipelines, how they can help developers and the teams to help them grow at scale. So the way I'm going to distribute the session is I'm going to talk about the motivation behind using the pipelines. First of all, why do you want to use those pipelines? Then cover what they are, what are pipes, and then finally I have a demo which will give you we'll go through the pipeline, writing it ourselves, and then we'll see it in action. So starting with the first topic, some of the challenges when you are growing your team. If you're a small team, that's fine, but if you have when you start growing, you have some of these CI/CD challenges. So some of these challenges include actually range of topics. One is that the number of tools on average used by development teams today is about 4 to 5. So a decade ago, we usually used to have just 2 tools, probably your repository, and then probably a server where you used to go and deploy your code, right? Today, on an average, we use a lot of tools. It's we have your repository, you have your CI server, you have your integration test server, you may have a cloud account where you want to deploy, you may want to get emails or Slack channel notifications. So there are a lot of tools that come in when you build your pipeline. And the challenge with these number of tools is that each of these tools come with their unique set of configuration, which means that you really have to learn those configuration needs for each and every tool and then build your pipeline around it. So your pipelines can grow a lot complex when you have a large set of tools in your pipeline, and of course it can go even more complex if you have branching in your pipeline, a conditional pipeline that you want to build. Also, you need specialized engineers to help you with that. So typically in larger organizations, you have a separate release team who helps you with configuring your repositories, how they connect to your CI server, how they can be deployed. So there are multiple tools. There's some people use Ansible to do that. Some people use AWS CLI and all sorts of things. So you need that team and set of engineers to help you configure and manage this pipeline. The challenge with that is that sometimes the team's availability is short. Most of the time we have like 10 development teams and you have one release team. So chances are that you most of the time you end up creating a ticket for them. They assign an engineer to you, they'll work with you, they configure your repository, a brand new repository that you want to deploy and test. And I remember one of in one of my earlier companies, we used to do that. We used to create a ticket for them, they used to assign. So I was developing a POC for a new feature, and all I wanted to do is wanted to make sure that my new feature is integrating well with the existing product, and all I wanted to do was deploy on the test environment and run my code. What happened is that when I created the ticket, the engineer was assigned to me, we configured, everything went well, and 6 days later I found out that there is a bug in my code which I should have fixed a lot earlier. So there's a lot of back and forth when we have separate teams doing that. All we want to do is, as a developer, is just deploy a code in some test environment, and we want to test it. That's it. Get some feedback. So that's one of the challenges about, having that separate team. And of course, if you have an on-prem CI/CD, then everybody knows the upgrade cost. Like almost every week, you'll get notified by the team saying you have some maintenance activity going on, some patching activity, and then you don't have your CI servers available during the weekend or any couple of days in a week. Which, for a growing team, you don't want that. You want that to be available all the time, and you don't want to manage. So for people who are building products, especially, you don't want to spend your time or energy on these kind of things like upgrading your on-prem servers, or even for CI/CD for that matter. You want to focus on building applications. So with that being said, these are some of the challenges that come when you are building your CI/CD pipelines. Now, almost every tool like Bitbucket pipeline, they kind of focus on some of the challenges. So we'll focus on what Bitbucket pipeline has to offer to overcome some of these challenges. So Bitbucket pipeline, especially, I mean, and entirely it's a fully hosted CI/CD alongside your Bitbucket cloud. So you see on the right hand side, that's my demo pipeline, that demo repository, sorry, which I created. And you see that pipeline, there's one section that is available from get go. I don't have to open a ticket, I don't have to talk to anybody. It's right there available whenever I need it. All I have to do is go in there, start putting in my configuration steps, and that's it. It will take it from there. So I don't have to manage any servers or clusters, no user management, nothing of that sort. People who have access to my repository will be able to create a pipeline and then start working on it straight away. You configure that as a YAML file, so you don't have to learn a new language. Yes, YAML is one thing, but YAML is something that's common these days, YAML and JSON. So you configure that as a YAML file, and that YAML file is a set of steps steps that you need to specify what you want to do in your pipeline, and then Bitbucket pipeline will take it from there and execute those steps for you. Also, you can see the entire history of your pipeline runs in the same repository. You don't have to go to another tool and then or a dashboard where you have to go and then check what was the commit ID that kicked off the pipeline, how many tests were executed, and all sorts of things. Everything is available within your repository. So even new people joining into your team can benefit from them. They can see how well your code has built over time. They can see the process. They can see everything. So that's one of the things that Bitbucket pipeline offers. So in order to get started, all you have to do is you have to create a Bitbucket pipelines.yaml file at the root of your source code, and that's it. And the structure of that YAML file looks something like this. So Bitbucket pipeline essentially works on Docker images, and what they do is they create they take that image, they create a container for you, and then run your steps within that container. So what you have to specify for sure is the image that you want to use. There are Atlassian provides a lot of predefined images that you can use. We'll see that in the demo. But good thing is you can also use your own Docker hub and then put one of the images that you own. Next section, you have to build your pipeline. So pipeline is another section you have to define, and the rest of them are optional. I mean, one of them is mandatory and rest of optional. So default is going to be the step that is going to be common for all your branches. If you have any branch specific steps, similar to what Prashant mentioned earlier, we have a master branch, you have a develop branch, you have a release branch. So maybe you want to have some more tests on production, then that goes into the branches section. If you want to run some static code analysis on your develop branch only and don't want to do it in production, then you put it under the branches. And then these default and branches and tags, you can also run on tags, bookmarks, even on pull request, or you can even go creative and write your own custom step or custom pipeline. All it does is each of these sections are divided into steps. So what you want to do, each of these steps is a script section. So um, essentially what you want to do is you want to build your code, you want to deploy, you want to get some feedback, you want to get notified when that something happens. So those are going under steps. So with that said, what we are going to do today is we are going to do this. We are going to push a change in Bitbucket repository. We are going to, it will kick off a build and test step. It will deploy to an AWS Lambda function. So it's set up in my AWS account, and it will give me a notification on my Slack channel. So an end-to-end flow, not very complex, but at least it will give an idea of how it integrates well with third party like AWS and Slack. So that being said, this is what the YAML file will look like. In my demo, I'll show you right now. Let's go over these items one by one. So the first in the image that I want to specify. So I've used an Atlassian default image. This comes with npm and Maven and other stuff installed. So I've used that image because I want mine is a Node.js project. So I want to have npm installed there. So I don't have to do that. I don't have to go into any server and do that myself. It's available. The default step, it's common for all the branches. So the first step that I've done is the build and test. In here right now, not much complexity. I'm just using the npm install and then using the source code as a zip and then exporting that as an artifact for the next step. This source code is going to be deployed as my Lambda handler in my AWS Lambda. Step two would be the deployed step, which will essentially take that code from the zip file and then deploy it, upload it to the AWS Lambda in my account. So you see there, that image that I've used does not have AWS CLI. So the first step is I install CLI, I export my access key ID, secret access key, the region I want to deploy in, and then finally using that CLI, I upload that function, as you can see in the zip file parameter that I've specified. Finally, there is an after script tag that if you want to run something after each and every step, regardless of your steps execution, then that goes into after script. So under after script, I am specifying that I want to say, like, send a message to my Slack channel saying my pipeline was completed. So this, as I, as I said, it's a simple pipeline, but at least it shows you how easy it is to configure. And the good thing about Bitbucket is that if you edit this YAML file within your, not going to source tree, but inside your browser itself, then on the right hand side you will get indications or advice on what you can add more steps, add variables to your pipeline, and then it will help you build your pipeline easily. So that's what we're going to do in a demo. So this is what it looks like when I run the demo. And if I go to pipeline, for each and every commit, it will trigger off my build. That's my build number. That's number 10. It kicked off through that commit ID that's specified under it. I was the committer, so that's my image over there, how many seconds it took. And then the pipeline will show you the steps that you have configured. So build and test was one, and the deploy. So under build and test, if you click there on the right hand side, you will get the logs of all of those steps. If there were any issues or in, like, it usually those are in debug mode, so you'll get all the information there. Similarly, deploy, as we saw earlier, I was installing AWS CLI, so that's there, exporting variables, finally uploading my Lambda function, and then sending the Slack channel notification. So that's how it looks. It's right there in your source code. So go to pipelines, and then you will see a history of all the builds that I've run so far. You can go into each of them and then see what has happened in each of them. All right. So the next step is, so now this, I'll go back a little bit. This is still, if you see here, some of the challenges that so this does help solve a lot of things. Doesn't matter how many tools I used, I can still configure them in my pipeline. I don't need a separate team to manage my releases anymore. So there's no problem of scheduling availability, and there is no cost of on-prem. I think what really would be good if all of that configuration or installation of AWS, if that can be taken away as well, then that could be another thing. Right now, I know it's not that complicated. You just have to do a curl command. Even for Slack channels, you have to do that. But imagine like you are integrating with something else, which you have to first get a token and then authenticate and then kind of do some tests around or upload something there. Then it could get, your pipeline could get complicated. So that's where Bitbucket pipes come in. So Bitbucket pipes are essentially a plug and play way to configure your pipelines. They are very powerful when you use third party tools like AWS, Slack, or any other Selenium to be the popular tool that we use. And you can use a pre-configured pipe or build your own pipes as well. And we'll talk about what that looks like. So again, in your editor, in your Bitbucket, you can see that on the right hand side, you can get a lot of pipes. And essentially, in our example as well, we are going to use one of those predefined pipes. Good thing about that editor is that you can get the source code, like the snippet that you want to include in your script section as inside that editor, so you can just copy and then paste it. And then Bitbucket works with almost all major cloud providers and even more. So this is what it looks like. On the left hand side, we have the pre-pipes configuration that we just saw earlier, and on the right hand side, if you see, I'm using under the script section under deploy, I'm using a pipe which is saying Atlassian AWS Lambda demo that deploy, and all it expects me to provide is my keys, the function that I want to upload to, and then the code that that I that I have. Even for Slack notification, I have a script, so it takes that complexity or configuration out of your worry, and then all you have to do is provide some set of variables or key value pairs that it will take and do it for you. This is especially powerful when you have a separate team who are managing your CI CDs, and then you don't want, like, imagine later on AWS CLI version 2 changes the way that we interact with it. We have to specify another step in order to authenticate against AWS. Then imagine like you have 50 100 repositories in your organization. If you have the left side of configuration pre-pipes, and you have to go to into each and every of those configuration and then start updating your code. With pipes, it gets a little easier. All you have to do is update your pipe and you're done. You don't have to do anything else in any of your repositories. So pipes can be very helpful when you have such kind of team structure. So with that being said, we're finally on to demo. So I prepared a video which I've I'll show you how easy it is to write that pipeline that we have discussed, and I'll pause in between and kind of explain what it's doing. So this is my editor. I'm starting with writing an image. So specified the image that I want to use in my pipeline. I am going to use a default pipeline, and then the step would be build and test. So the default is going to execute on each and every commit on all the branches. In the script, I'm specifying I want to install npm, and then finally just zip the JavaScript file into a zip. And then after script would be artifacts is just exporting that zip so that it's available in the next step. Step number 2 would be deploy. So under deploy, I'm specifying a script. In here, I'm going to use pipes. So as you can see, we want to deploy to AWS Lambda. That's readily available. Use that. And like it has a lot of configuration. All we need is just setting those keys and then specifying the location to my zip file. So that's my sample function in my AWS account. Now, the cool thing about pipelines is that you can use a secured variable. So if you don't want to expose some of the sensitive information to your developers, then you can always use that secured variables, and you can use those variables and reference them inside your pipelines. It can also reference from the repository settings. So if you have an administrator on your repository, then you define these variables there, and then Bitbucket pipeline will take it from there as well. So that's one of the cool features, and at least you have that right on the right hand side. You have those it advises you what you can do. As you can see, I'm not exposing my access key and secret access key, and it won't be exposed to any of my developers as well. They can reference it, but they can't see what they are. And if it is a secured variable, then Bitbucket pipeline, when it runs, when it prints in logs, it will mask them. So you can't see them in logs as well. For Slack notification as well, I'm using a pipe. You can see that in just like 25, 30 odd lines, I've built my entire pipeline. And as soon as I commit, it will kick off the build. So that's my commit. I'm going into my repository, going to pipelines, and you can see that it has started already.
Sorry, Kush, just conscious of time.
Yep, I'm almost done. I'm just getting this finished.
Yeah, I know people have commitments and meetings
I know,
and stuff.
I know.
Yeah,
Right.
no worries.
Yep. So as you can see, it has deployed, done everything, and finally you see the notification was successful, and even the Lambda function update was successful. So that's how easy it is to. It took me like 5 minutes to configure my pipeline instead of waiting for those 6 days that I mentioned earlier. So um, that's what it is. All about Bitbucket pipelines and pipes. So thank you. Any questions? If anybody wants to ask, feel free to unmute or put it in chat.
It seems like everyone has to run
Yep,
to the
of course.
other meetings.
Yeah, sorry it took a little bit over, but
No worries. I managed to give two $10 codes to David and Chris for having his camera on all the time. I was hoping to. I have another one. If anyone has question, I can give another $10 code. It's good. Very good feedback, Prashant and Kish. Very informative. It seems like people could learn. Unfortunately, I'm not a user technical anymore of Bitbucket or Git, but I did get a grasp of it. So it is very complex.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, again, this will be available as a video. If anybody had to jump off or have any want to reiterate it or revisit it, I'll post the link through our Slack channel, but also I'll try to post it on my LinkedIn as well. So just find me on LinkedIn. You should be able to just reach out to me through there as well. Yep.
Yeah, I just shared also our Sydney Atlassian community event. If everyone.
So
Chris has a question.
Chris has a question. So yes, actually that's a very good question. I know both of these products are from Atlassian. So that's one of the. I think with Bamboo specifically, most of the time you have to have your you have to maintain that servers, and then you have to scale them as per your team size. So if you're really and Bamboo has a lot of other options as well. So if you have a team that's not really exponentially growing, and if you don't see that many builds going on in, you can define the amount of builds that can happen on your Bamboo servers, and you can of course define some um, hard limit or soft limit on your Bamboo servers. But if you don't know that, if you're just starting maybe a startup, or if you don't know how your pipelines is going to behave, and you don't really have a separate team to maintain those servers, then I would probably go with pipelines, because it scales automatically. It doesn't matter whether you have 10 builds in a day or whether you have 1,000 builds in a day. It will scale by itself. But Bamboo is primarily used by larger organizations, probably enterprises, because they want controlled execution in their environment. They don't want everybody just to go and start building pipes. So that's why people use Bamboo. So that's kind of more on use case. But yeah, for a smaller team, startup, you don't even have so many engineers or teams. You don't want to learn the expertise of each and every individual tool that you use. Like if you have a you want to run your test on Selenium, you want to integrate with a lot of tools, then you don't want your developers to be spending time on all those things, then yeah, pipeline would be a better option. Pipeline does have some limitations about the number of builds it can run depending on the plan. So that is one of the things to be considered. So it provides about 2,500 minutes of build per month by default, and if you have the premium plan, it goes to 3,500. I'm not sure if you can talk to their sales and extend that, but I'm pretty sure you can. So that's, hope that helps.
Yes, thanks very much, Kish. That's good explanation.
Available in Bitbucket server. Not seen. This is primarily a cloud, Bitbucket cloud offering, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's in the
Just to
pipeline.
add to that, I think by going 2022, so Atlassian is becoming cloud first. So all the non-cloud product anyway are basically gonna get decommissioned eventually or not supported. That's also a thing to consider. If you are a new team or starting between Bitbucket, your hosted server versus Bitbucket cloud. Also, as you can see in Bitbucket pipeline, the main thing is different, is like you just have to write the script. All the pipes are already available. That's the benefit, Chris, compared to Bamboo. In Bamboo, you still have to maintain your build agent and the version of software they are running. So for example, if you are running like a JavaScript version or NPM or like IntelliJ or whatever you use to actually build that thing, you have to maintain those tools. On Bitbucket pipeline, it just comes
and
through
like
configuration.
not to mention, like if you have like 1,000 builds running, then you have to set up a load balancer in front of it to make sure that you have multiple Bitbucket Bamboo servers. Also with pipelines, and one of the things that really interest me is the images that I can use my own Docker images. So as you can see that by default it has a lot of dependencies, but if you have something which is very unique to your organization and then you don't want people to kind of include that in each and every script, then of course feel free to write your own image, put that, and then and even your pipes, like you can have like 10 steps inside one pipe, and then all you have to do is tell your teams to use those pipes or images. So like the 100 to 150 lines of configuration will probably string to like 10-15 lines. Like you don't have to do, just put everything in your image that you want to do, and then all you have to do is start writing your steps. And even some of these steps you can hide from the others, so after script or something that you can put inside your images. So regardless, if your developer forgets to send a notification on the email, your script will, the image is going to do it for you. So that's powerful to do it. What are the advantages?
Octopus.
I'm not really used Octopus, so I don't know if I can comment on that.
But the main thing is, I think one of the advantages you can think of is your CI/CD is integrated within the repository. So that's one benefit that you can probably think of. But again, it can go both ways. So if you are using something like Octopus CI/CD, which scales across like multiple repositories and everything, then you have that common view there as well. So there are pros and cons. So depending
and I think
on
there
your
are like
case,
there are like 1,000 options these days. Like you have GitHub, you have GitHub Actions, you have Bamboo, you have Jenkins, you have AWS developer co-developers. So depending on your tech stack, your team structure, you might choose one over the other. For instance, you have a lot of AWS serverless architecture and you don't want to go anywhere else, then AWS also has its own. But yeah, Bitbucket to me, it's it's like really useful because like many organizations use Bitbucket and it's like tightly integrated. You don't have to set up. So that's the one thing benefit that if you have Bamboo as well or anything else, you have to go to another team, explain them your needs. They'll tell you probably put some scripts inside this folder in your Bitbucket repository, and they'll read it from there and then start executing your pipes. But in this way, you don't have to even do that. It's right available. It's there. And then plus point is you can actually write your own pipeline by yourself using the images and then the pipes.
Welcome.
I'm glad people ask questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for staying and asking questions.
Yep.
It's all right. Thank you. I do
Thank
have
you.
to go now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hope to
no,
see you
thank you,
next time.
everyone.
Sorry, guys. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, bye.
See you.